He's independent Scrum caretaker. Um, he focuses on humanizing work with Scrum, and he started using Scrum in 2003 and has worked across many, many teams and organizations. And he's written two well-known books on Scrum. One of them you for sure you've heard of is the Scrum Pocket Guide. I believe what you have 4 editions now,
Yep,
Gunther, of the Scrum Pocket Guide.
yep.
Um, he also partnered with Ken Schwaber at scrum.org or Schwaber at scrum.org, where he served as the director of the professional Scrum series. So Gunther, we're so glad you're here with us. Thanks for being here. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jamie. So wonderful to be here again. It's been a while. I haven't really counted how many times I've been talking to the SMOTU community, but I love it. I was just still updating my presentation, still just picking up on last sort of ideas. I'll share that. Um, let me start sharing my screen and talk you through what I mean with reimagining EO Scrum. Um, Last year in September, I published a paper with the same title, and that was then what you picked up, Jamie, right? And then you contacted me, hey, do you want to do a talk about it? And I felt like, yes, let's do that. Um, it should have happened a long, long time ago. So why do I say that? So let me take you back into history a little bit. Like you say, Jamie, I've been working with Ken at Scrum the Talk. And at Scrum the Talk, we've been trying to sort of change the world at some point of time by creating a framework that we called Agility Path, a way to introduce Scrum using Scrum, sort of iteratively, incrementally, and so on with backlogs and all those things. Failed miserably. Nobody took us seriously, and so on. We've worked around scaling with Nexus and so on. And in 2016, I left my position at Scrum the Talk. Why? Um, um, Not because of the failures, but because I wanted to be out there again, work with teams, work with organizations. And miraculously, quite contrary to the market of today, but by then I was able to find some interesting assignments. So I started working with companies, both with leadership teams as well as their Scrum teams or development teams, which was sort of a prerequisite for myself because I truly wanted to have an impact. I wanted to make sure that I could sort of cut through all of the layers of an organization, have access to all those people. So, and I visited a number of companies, um, mainly across Europe, um, and at sort of at different scales, meaning from small to medium to some really large companies. With medium, I mean, for instance, like having a couple of hundred people working for them, 300 people, sometimes 400 people. There were companies big like that. And I was astonished by what I found because that was 2016, 2017, 2018. Um, Scrum had been around for so long already by then. I had been doing it indeed, like you say, Jamie, since 2003. I felt like, how can this still be sort of new and how can this still feel so novel and different for people? But still, it was. I was amazed because all those companies, all their teams, they were all trying to adopt Scrum in one way or another. That was their focus. They wanted to do Scrum. Um, I was not mostly amazed over sort of the lack of understanding of Scrum in a way, but mostly about how they were trying to adopt Scrum. I felt like you're just setting yourself up for failure almost because you want to do old school recipes, copy paste what others are doing, and so on. It just, I was amazed. So, and after a few years in 2019, finally, I gathered all of my thoughts and I recorded a little movie, a couple of minutes only, and wrote a white paper about it. And I called that white paper in that movie The Illusion of Agility. And At the same time, because I'm truly convinced of this idea, I also wrote a blog note about it. In Scrum, inspection without adaptation is pointless. It's futile. That means making observations. We like to do that, by the way, almost bashing people, blaming people, whatever, or saying nasty things about people, establishing things that we don't like, whatever. That's all nice and cool, and that works fine on social media, which is all about negativity, clickbaits, and so on. But it's not helpful. You have to also propose an alternative or a potential solution, a way out. So at the time that I recorded a little movie called Delusion of Agility, I also recorded a little movie that was called Reimagine Your Scrum as sort of a way out of that illusion of agility. But for whatever reason, by then I didn't create a white paper around it. I only created a white paper about the illusion of agility. And I don't know why it took me so long, but finally last year, maybe because I'm mostly out of work, I don't know, maybe I had some time available, but finally last year I gathered all of my thoughts and ideas and I finally published that white paper in September called Reimagine Your Scrum. Although I've been using that at companies since 2016, because by the end of 2016, having worked with some companies, having left Scrum.org for about half a year, that was already my sort of, let's call it a recipe or antidote in a way. And let me take you through that complete story. Now, I don't know if you recognize this guy. I was reminded of this as we started. Before all you beautiful people were allowed in, I was talking to Jamie and how are you doing, Gunther? And I was like, oh, I'm feeling fine. And that is absolutely true. But also, there's a part of me that feels like this guy. Don Quixote fighting or Don Quixote fighting the windmills with Sancho Panza in the background. Oh my God, what's my master doing? This is also a part of me. This eternal fight against windmills. What are we fighting? We have the best possible intentions, but um, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like this character too much. That was one of my last minute changes in the presentation. But let me take you through that idea of the illusion of agility first. And what I found astonishing in many companies that if I look at them, visit them, this is sort of, you all know these types of situation, right? Open office spaces and so on. I don't know why, but everybody wants to go for it. Everybody needs to keep silent because you can't talk to people, otherwise somebody will look up angry at you and so on. It's like, oh my God, how can this ever work in a situation of Scrum? How can you work as a team in such a situation where you can't speak up, everybody's listening to music, whatever? What about communication, interaction, human connections? By the way, research also shows that these types of working environments are horrible for just anybody. Also for people that have to do individual work, by the way. It stresses out people, it just whatever. But certainly in our situation, it doesn't work. And why doesn't it work? Because despite the fact that everybody is in one big room, they are totally disconnected from each other. You could at the same time put everybody in their own little cubicle again, and you would have the exact same situation. There's no difference. Cubicles form a physical barrier between people, and in an open office, it's full of, let's say, what I call mental barriers between people. So it's full of disconnectedness. And the disconnectedness inhibits, prevents, kills every form of engagement. And how can you build great software? How can you tackle complexity? How can you do that without discussing openly, discussing, debating problems, suggestions, options, alternatives with each other live, let's say almost real time? I've asked people, how do you do that? Oh, yeah, if I have to contact a colleague of mine who's like 2 seats away from me, I send him a text message or an email. I was like, oh my God, how awful is that? I remember the old thing that we called information radiators in a way that was all about radiating information so they don't have to look it up, so that it's as quickly as possible you get information from person to another, get it back, and so on. So that was crazy. So in certainly the larger organizations, they have this in place. At one company in the Netherlands, I really raised it as an independent with the CTO of the company. And even he said, oh, sorry, Gunther, can't do anything about it. It's a decision, company decision, and facilities wants to work, whatever. Crazy things. By the way, in the end, the underlying thing about getting all these people together was actually um, budget. It was cost savings, saving on office spaces. That was sort of when I ask questions, five whys, why this, why that. And in the end, you always come up with, yeah, but it's cheaper for the company. Well, it looks cheaper, but I don't think it actually is. So, overall, what I found with all those companies that I was working with is that they are not organized for value. They focus on volume. And this idea of cost cutting, cost saving, is because they work on this, what I call in my book, the industrial mindset. It's about utilization. It's about maximizing resources. It's about reusing people as if they were resources. It's like moving people around from one team to another team, thinking that because we want to sort of optimize how we use them. And that's all about volume. That's about doing more faster at a cheaper cost, producing more units. And that might make sense in a manufacturing environment, but it doesn't in our work. By the way, when I talk about value and volume, be clear, value with value, I mean in general outcome, impact, the impact of our work. That is where value is. When those people talk about volume, they talk about output. It's about the something, creating something, and they want to do more of it, and they want to do faster. And that's sort of manufacturing thinking, industrial thinking, which is also reflected in those organizational structures that they have in place. Management layers on top of poor little peasant individuals like ourselves that are locked into silos, where silos are sort of lock in people based upon the fact that they seem to have the same sort of functional expertise. So and you get all those silos and the biggest division is not just between the silos, but in general between in general terms business and IT or business and development or whatever. It's crazy. Um, Today, 2026, this is still how organizations work, how they are organized. And then they're surprised when facing problems and businesses and markets and demands and customer demands and competition that they found out, oh my God, we are so slow. Yes, that's because you have very rigid structures that make you slow. It's full of delays and waste. Why those poor individuals? How do they work together? Because we've got governance in place. We've got governance and methodologies, and they describe who should be working with whom at what point of time, what should they be doing, what should they be producing, what meetings should be taking place, what handovers should be taking place, and so on. So this is rigid, and um, I like to say that rigid is what they are, agile is what they need to be. And this is rigidity. But it's also based on the fact that people think that they can limit this thing called agile scrum, whatever, to just us individuals on the work floor, let's say. So, and what is the common response then? Oh, what now? Oh, we're running into trouble. Oh, we need agile. We have to go agile. We have to become agile because everybody's doing that. We've heard about it and so on. Nobody knows what they mean with it. It's totally it's become an almost meaningless term. But everybody's doing it, so that's the sort of the miracle pill that they're looking for. We need agile. Cool. So they do that. They hear about this thing called Scrum. In a way, they want to go agile. In a way, they want to increase their agility, meaning reduce their rigidity and increase their agility. So that's defining at some point of time they're too rigid, they're not agile enough, meaning their agility is, let's say, rather low. The agility as being able to respond to changes, let alone create or cause changes for others to follow, um, getting things out on the market, getting so they have a low agility. And by then, certainly 2016, 17, it was all about agile transformations. I've put it between quotes because the term got a little bit sort of we get sort of out of the market. It doesn't mean that people are not trying to do those things anymore. They just don't call it an agile transformation anymore. So the goal is to increase their agility, being faster, responsive, flexible, like the original word, swiftly responding to change, innovating again. Um, and they go through these agile transformation projects, and by the end, and that's often after several years, companies sometimes 2, 3 to 4 years, they find out, oh my God, at some point of time they wake up and they find out, oh my God, our agility, let's say, is absolutely not what we thought it was. We've invested, we've sent people on trainings, we've formed teams, we've adopted Scrum. We now work in 2 week sprints instead of 6 months phases. We thought we were going to be so much farther than we thought than we actually are. So the actual agility is a lot lower than expected. That's what I call the deflation by reality, following sort of an expression about the illusion of agility. They thought they were building up agility, not really happening. So deflation is sort of based on, it's like a balloon. You've got a balloon and you fill it with air and then you let go for a moment and it just falls flat on the floor. It's what I call the deflation by reality. And when I go to look at those companies and see, okay, how did this come about? It's because they've wanted to do what other people are doing. They wanted to copy paste what others have been doing. I think by then it was still a lot around the Spotify model because ING in the Netherlands had made that they had made beautiful marketing videos about how they have implemented the Spotify model and how much better they were off now and so on. Now I was in touch with people on the work floor and let me say at least that the videos were marketing in the sense that they did not really reflect the situation on the work floor, let's say. But certainly the whole of Europe at least wanted to do Spotify. And they all went for the same. They now started calling the team squads and whatever. And in the end, they just used almost Spotify terms and they just stuck it on people, on departments and so on without fundamentally changing anything. It was a sort of massive, I call it mass production approach. All teams going to the same types of education, all teams having to do the same things, having to apply the same practices. It's like mass production, and it's like they all have to do it in a way too short time span. It's crazy. Following recipes, fixed sort of checklist. Okay, do this now first, A this and B this, and so on. It was sort of the whole idea of agility, I think, was getting totally lost in this mass production copy paste ID. And that's when I realized, oh my God, they're applying industrial recipes to become agile. It is never going to work. So that's a huge conundrum also, because you want to become agile and you have no idea what it means. That's sort of crazy. That's sort of the idea why I called it reimagining your Scrum as a sort of way out. But that was sort of my finding. And what I missed with those companies is that the hard work, all those times, all that time they spent on training people, imposing people on how they should work, imposing practices, making sure that everybody works in 2 week sprints because that's what Scrum says. And all their sprints have to start and end on the same date. It's like, oh my God, that is like industrializing your Scrum to death. It's taking out all of the openness of Scrum. It's an open framework. It allows you to tune, to tweak your Scrum to your specific context. And the context of a team A building a certain product with a certain technology for a certain user base might be completely different than team B working with different technology, different user base, and so on. So even within companies, multiple diverse manifestations of Scrum are possible and should be possible, but people think, organizations, leadership thinks that everybody has to work in the same way. Crazy, don't get it. But another thing that I noticed at the same time is teams had no team spaces. Look at the open office types of things. Team instability. Team people were being pulled out of their teams all the time and then sent to another team. Oh yeah, we need a great product owner over there now. You've done a great job for the past 2 months. I want you to go from that team to the other team. So no cohesion, no sort of performance, not even sort of minimal functional performance coming out of that because teams were being pulled apart all the time. This meeting culture, so many people in teams that I worked with were being dragged to meetings that had so little or nothing to do with their actual work as part of the team, which is then disturbance for the team. Like it ruins focus, not just for that person, but also for the rest of the team. And people keep imposing delivery deadline pressures on people. You know, the famous iron triangle of software development. Um, Fixing date, scope, budget, and so on. But then you're allowed to deliver that in sprints of 2 weeks. Yeah, but the end thing sort of remains the same. What about intermediate, regular, frequent delivery of value instead of aiming at those things? And then another thing that is for me so important, because I have this very strong focus on the human aspect of things. Um, Layoffs. Um, Removing people from the organization. And how awful is this then to see management leadership abuse terms from agile and certainly from lean by labeling people or their activities as waste. Oh, that is waste, or that is not valuable. And they're just giving themselves an excuse to lay off those people. And what I noticed with leadership teams is so they usually have like sometimes they have like big waves of layoffs happening. And by the end of after a certain wave of layoffs, management is convinced that everybody's happy now, everybody's engaged, motivated because the layoffs are over. They're all happy that they're allowed to stay. That doesn't work with people like that. It's a culture of fear. People are already thinking about when will the next wave be and will I survive that wave again? And it totally gets their focus away from doing work into job security and all those types of things. So crazy things. And then I have very limited imagination. But that's sort of what I would call the new complexity domain. You know, complexity domain, simple, complex, complicated, and chaos and so on. That was sort of a new complexity domain that I would just call catastrophe. It's industrialized Scrum, no room for people, people still being suppressed, no imagination allowed, no creativity allowed. Anybody is sort of sticking his head up too high and not doing what people thought they should have been doing, heads being chopped off and so on. So overall a culture of total mediocrity. Because if you suppress all the potential ups, people will never get their heads up again. So, and I was so disappointed, so I wrote a paper about it. And my conclusion was that whatever people would call an digital transformation, I might call it something else, they just deliver an illusion of agility. They create an illusion that our agility has really improved because we now work in 2 week sprints and now everybody's working as a team and we've got product owners for all those things. But underlying, it's still a dysfunctional mess full of disconnectedness. So and that's the fight we're fighting. We are not organized for value. We are organized for volume. And just by putting the individuals into teams is not going to change anything. It's still rigid structures. It's still full of rigidity. It's slow. It's delays, whatever, combined with all of the other things that I just mentioned. So I was sort of um, quite some disappointing findings. And one of the biggest findings, one of the things that really stuck with me is when working with what I called maybe small, medium organizations from 100 up to maybe 400 people in an organization. I felt like they're going to be natural agile, right? They're not like big corporations with offices around the world or so. They're going to be like really, they were part of, by the way, of a big international organization, but locally 300 people. I felt well, no, they were full of like old school project management office types of things and methodologies and still stuck into Prince 2 types of thinking. I was like, oh my God. And one of the things that is for me the biggest problem with this industrial way of working that we've as an organization, we've got our eyes completely on our internal operations. How do people work? How much do they produce? How available are they? How are they utilized as resources and so on? So industrial thinking. So it's all about optimizing for that in a way. But it doesn't help if you don't look beyond the borders or the boundaries of your organization to your users, to the market, to your market position, and so on. So this is not working for complex creative work. Not in the least the fact that all those highly trained, skilled, educated software development professionals and all the other people around are being treated like mindless workers. It's crazy how so many people within organizations think they know better how to create software. So we hire people to do that job, and then leadership steps in and says, "Yeah, yeah, we hired you for that, but it can only take so much time." But I thought it was sort of my expertise, and it's sort of crazy things happening. But my conclusion, at least from a lot of those things, is the illusion of agility. One of the reasons is also why that organizations try to limit it, let's say, to the team level. And you know what? More agile teams, just forming individuals into teams, calling that teams, because that's also like not really teams in my view. But it does not make a more agile organization. The organization is too rigid. So, like I said, inspection without authorization, pointless in Scrum. So I wanted to help people think about better ways of working. So already by then, by the end of 2016, I formulated this thing called Reimagine Your Scrum. Why? To firm up your agility, to create at least a sound basis upon which you can grow and develop again. And let's agree, one of the things I said is just combining individuals. Sometimes I don't know how that happens. Sort of, sometimes it feels almost randomly. Getting people to sort of get together and calling that a team often leads to just little micro teams, often locked within those same silos, having the same disconnectedness as they used to have as individuals. The only difference for me is that I've used that metaphor already. Before that, you had all those individuals running around like headless chickens throughout the organization. Now you have micro teams running like headless chickens throughout the organizations. Teams of like three, four, whatever people. And one of the things that I missed in those organizations, yeah, but when you were forming teams, where was the idea of product? Because you want to do Scrum, you've got a product owner, you've got a product backlog, you want to create increments, releasable versions of product. And then I noticed that nobody thought about that. What is our product? So in that sense, because product defines almost sort of the cohesiveness of teams and the shared work and the shared purpose that they should work on. So you've got all those micro teams spread out across the organization, and often a number of those micro teams actually work on the same product. And they have to throw work from the one team to the other team. And then they throw it to another team again, and they throw it back to the first team. So it's full of handovers, and nobody's minding the overarching product. And product, like I said in 2020, when I wrote about Scrum, and it was later on also added to the Scrum Guide, product is the vehicle to deliver value. Well, product is actually important. So they didn't think about that, and that is important. Now, when you think about what is then a product, I think about product in a broad way. Uh, um, it's important. Product is not necessarily something that you would ship in a box into shops or whatever, or get it out there. Look at it, it can be a good, it's like that. It can be a device. It can even be a service. It can be an online service, meaning non-tangible. It can be a digital service. Ultimately, your product could even be the experience that you want to provide to people. So it can be lots of things, but the idea is that it provides value. And for me, not just value to anybody or to another team or to, I don't know, a manager within the organization or a department. No, no, it should deliver value to the consumers of the product, the people that are, sometimes you could call that users, end users, whatever. I like to call them consumers, the people that have to actually use the product. So for me in Scrum, Product is not a product if it doesn't go sort of end to end, start to finish, from collecting ideas up to delivering those ideas in the shape of functions, features, capabilities to the people having to consume the product. Because in the meantime, there's been some evolutions I notice in the world, and the idea of product is becoming more and more accepted and even embraced. But it hasn't really improved things because a lot of organizations call some internal service or a system also, that's also product. It doesn't really change because if you got, I'm talking about the end product, the total product. That should be product, and that should be the basis or the foundation, whatever you want to call it, the basis around which you should organize your Scrum. So that is reimagine your Scrum. The first step, know your product. And what I've tried to formulate for those organizations stuck with their agile transformations, not moving on, waking up from the deflation by reality and so on. Okay, let's make it small again. I always hoped that that would sound like reasonable and having the sort of idea in it of manageable. Let's make it small again. Let's have a look at your organization and pick one initiative where you've been doing Scrum. And for that initiative only, let's have a look at what is the actual product that these people, that team, or maybe multiple teams, often one team, that they're working on. So let's start there. And product is important because product defines what it means to get releasable, to create releasable output of it, increments. And that means, oh yeah, if you want to be able to produce something of releasable quality for this product, that means, oh yeah, we have to do this and this and this, all those things. And that means that all those abilities, all those skills need to be in your team, which in general is not in the team as they exist. So that is important because product should define your definition to done. What does it mean to produce a done version of this product? What does that entangle? What sort of people do we need? What skills, what expertise, what talents do we need? And those talents, those skills should be in your team. So starting with product, really important. If the product ends up being a really big product, let's try to slice it. Let's find a part of the product that we can work on for the time being. But I want that product to still be serving those end users, what I call those consumers. So know your product. That's the first step of reimagining your Scrum. And then let's see where we can take it for that. And I call it reboot your Scrum, reset your Scrum, or reimagine your Scrum. But for that selected product or that selected product slice only. I have no intention to go to that mass production thinking again. Let's look up one team. Let's see what is the real product. Let's clearly identify and define what the product is. And let's see what sort of skills and expertise do we need in the team. And then let's reboot our Scrum or your Scrum upon that selected product. Meaning, let's make sure that there's one product backlog. One product backlog owned and managed by one product owner, but an owner of the product, not some subpart or subsystem or a component. No, no, really the product that we have identified. Let's have a look at who is the best placed person to manage that product. In most organizations, I've made explicit, I would prefer that person to be from the business side of the organization, somebody who's closer at least to the end users and all of the product management work that it might entangle. So just as a way to sort of transcend that big gap between business and IT, let's identify the product and let's start with a product owner from the business and having a team or a developers in place and a scrum master and so on. And then help those people. Please, as leadership, help them, facilitate them. Make sure they have the tools, make sure they have the infrastructure, make sure that they have a dedicated workspace, make sure that they have authorizations to access systems and so on. I don't, whatever you can think of, access to testing data, whatever. Make sure that they can do their job. So you've got all that expertise now together. Let's make sure that they can do their job. And then start releasing what I called creating sashimi releases, tasty slices of sushi or sashimi. Make sure that we create sashimi releases in no more than a sprint's time. Let's make sure that we do that via. I'm sort of for the people that don't have a software development background. I know I'm using a lot of software development terms, sort of hoping that it makes sense at least for some people. Um, Make sure that you do that through environments, a pipeline, whatever that is being controlled by the team itself, not by an external department, the release department, whatever, by the team itself. So in that sense, make sure that we set up, and that's sort of what I call a development hub. That's sort of, as we said, a hub that can totally it's always autonomously do all the work required to create a tasty sashimi releases, slices of product. And let's learn from that. Let's do that for a number of sprints. Yeah. But the difficulty in this way of working is picturing this within the organization. Yeah, but how does that work? And the problem is the following. So we agree what they call teams is not what I would call teams. The problem is that governance should not define how people should work together. That should be the product. They should be working together on a product and then organizing themselves for that. You don't need all those big, whatever, bureaucratic procedures and whatever for that in place. You need to have a product that is focused, that is reaching your end users, your consumers. In general, they're outside of the company, but even if it's an internal product and you build it for people within the organization, still treat them as if they were external. So they're in the first place consumers, and only in the second place they are now colleagues. Make sure you have a product owner. Make sure you have all of the skills needed to actually create releasable increments of that product. And that's probably not going to be just IT skills, because that's how a lot of organizations start. No, no, also look at potential business skills that you need. I don't know, business analysts, functional analysts, sometimes writers, people that make sure that they are having somebody to facilitate them, to case them, to guide them through that change and so on. And this is then a team and therefore a Scrum development zone. That means I've called it a zone because it's something maybe virtual that you create within the organization. You pull people out of their silos and you bring them together around a product as one or multiple Scrum teams. But that sounds easy, but it seems to be very difficult because it means that it seems you're pulling people away from hierarchy and managers and department heads and so on, and they don't like that. They feel like, no, 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 I need to be able to control my people because I'm expected to do that or I'm accountable for that and I have to keep control of them. I want to make sure that my people are used optimally, meaning that I decide where they should be working at one point of time. And suddenly you come across that. So you cut through all those silos and bring people together around the purpose of creating product increments. And that seems to be a huge difficulty. A lot of people seem to feel like, yeah, but that means giving up on control or responsibility. Yeah. I see one hand raised. Is that a question? Go ahead. As far as I'm concerned, that's fine, Karen.
All right, I'm the lone hand. So great to hear all your experience and wisdom. I have a modicum of experience in Agile, and I wanted to ask you, say if you have a modernization project for a procurement system, government,
Hmm.
and they're going from on-prem to cloud. So would you just have one product manager for that? Or what's
Yeah, I prefer one person having sort of the overview. So also in the sense of simplicity a little bit, so that everybody within the organization, if they want to know what is happening, what is being planned, where do we stand, what is the progress, how much money have we already spent, whatever, that they can go up to that one person. It doesn't mean that one person have to do every little nitty-gritty, whatever detail of the work. But one person having that overview with one plan, product backlog, containing all of the work that that person deems as valuable.
And for, say, an organization like a government organization, what is the happy path to choose the right person?
Well, I always say the best person to make those decisions, to give that overview, the person that can really connect or build bridges across the world from almost consumers to stakeholders to developers and to the creation thing. Um, I like this idea of emergence also in that sense. I'm sure that there's always a person that ever feels like, yeah, he or she, oh, that would be a great one. But it's just how to come up with that information because it might be hidden somewhere deep in the organization. It might not be in, I don't know, the CV or the function or whatever. So I like to look around, ask around. And what sometimes happens if you have all those little micro teams in place, um, they all have their own little product owner, let's say. Often it's astonishing to see how many of those product owners always go back to the same person for a number of decisions. In general, that is might be the real product owner. So
So,
look
thank
around,
you. So,
listen to
does that
people. Yeah.
happen during discovery? Where does that ideally and then
Yeah.
actually tend to happen?
Well, that's part of this reimagining your Scrum. So have a look at one of the initiatives. Your initiative is clear. Try to clearly define, identify, create the boundaries of the product. It seems like you're able to do that. And then go look for that person that could be like, oh, really great product owner. And then make sure you've got all of the expertise and the people in the teams. Um, in the development teams then in old terminology, and then reboot your Scrum. Just start again with a real product backlog and try to go for a first sprint as quickly as possible and learn as you go.
Amen. Thank you so much, Gunther.
Yeah, okay, you're welcome. Yeah, Sheila, you've got a question too.
Well, I have a comment, or well, it might be a question. Yeah. Um, if if you have a bunch of product owners going back to one person for the answers, is that person really the product owner, or is that really the subject matter expert or the operational business manager?
It can be actually it can be all of them, but if it is for me, if it is the one person that has to make up decisions over ordering priorities, what should we do next, changes in priorities and so on, and several people always go back to that same person, that might be a problem with hierarchy. That person says, "I'm so important, I want to make all those decisions." But in general, it often means that that person has the sort of helicopter view over the product in a way. So in that sense, it would be for me the really great product owner. Now it's not always that easy in that sense. Um, some a lot of those people are somewhere on the hierarchical ladder, somewhere rather up often, and they feel like product owner is sort of below them. It's like, yeah, yeah, but I'm a manager. I've worked hard to climb the ladder. And it would almost feel like being called a product owner would almost feel like a demotion, not a promotion, but a
Well,
demotion.
it can be a demotion in terms of compensation. The other thing is, if you take someone who is in the operational business area and you put them into a product owner role where they're no longer involved in the day-to-day business, are they going to lose touch and over time not make as good decisions? On the other hand, you do have the people who are making the decisions because they have the power, but they don't have the knowledge to make informed decisions. And that
Yeah,
doesn't necessarily result in a product that anybody wants to use.
yeah. But my viewpoint is that if they feel like, for whatever reason, I don't care what the reason is, feel like not picking up this ID, this accountability of being the product owner, then somebody else has to. And that person not willing to do that has to accept that in Scrum terms, as from that point on, he or she is what we would call a stakeholder. They will be involved, but it means we want a product owner with a mandate to actually take decisions. Yeah, Joel.
I really like where you've been going with this. The thing I'm trying to wrap my head around is how can you explain to me the daylight between this and large scale Scrum? Because it seems to have a lot of the same themes to it, and I'm not piecing out what's different here.
Yeah, I know this real difference. What I've tried to do with this is to make the change small again. Just one product. Let's have a look at one of your Scrum initiatives, whether it's a project or whether a product or something. Let's have a look at it and just focus on that one part of your development for the time being, and leave all the other ones alone. Just focus on this one first. Let's use this as an example, almost, I don't know whether you would call it a pilot or not, just as a way to really see and learn from properly implemented Scrum, so to speak. So that's how to make it small. Don't do it just yet for all of the other things. I'll come back on that, by the way.
Yeah,
And
Okay,
just,
thank you.
yeah,
I will have a small comment on this. We're doing the same thing right now in the organization. We're not calling it pilot as well, but the main goal is to learn the what does this transformation means for this organization, because
yeah,
every organization is different. So
yeah.
that's the main idea for the small test.
Cool, cool. It's sort of aligned with something I'll come back on. Thanks for adding that comment. So then the next step is what I would call release and measure. So actually release those slices, measure your impact, measure your satisfaction, measure the outcome of your work, and then gradually expand, improve your current Scrum Development Hub, and start thinking after a while, start about doing the same for the next initiative. Learn again, let them learn from each other, and the next initiative, until at some point of time, all of your development is moved towards what I would call development hubs, semi-autonomous units, entities within the organization. And what is important about this, again, inspection adaptation thing, is that the source of inspection is value. Are you delivering value? It's not about how many features, it's about are you building the features that people appreciate, that people want, that people find useful, and measuring that. And this goes back then a long time ago, Scrum the Talk, agility path, which later was um, sort of evolved into evidence-based management by Scrum the Talk. So measure your value, measure the value you're having. So, and that is an important step to shift your focus from output, the increment with the features that you created, towards outcome, meaning the appreciation of your users over the increment that you have created. And that's important because based upon that, sort of in line with what you said, Dan, that's about learning. Are we doing the right stuff? Inspection. And then the adaptation is, do we need other skills? Do we need more skills? Do we need more people? Do we need different practices? Whatever do we need to change? How can we optimize our Scrum development zone to deliver more value in the future by learning and adapting? And while doing so, and that's certainly what you pointed, I think, to Dan, because by doing this, you will have an impact. You will, let me say it like that, you will get into conflict with a lot of existing procedures within the organization. It's about how you fund initiatives, how do you do financing, how do you do old school term resource allocation, HR procedures, how do you review people, how do you incentivize people, how do you work with other departments, product management people, sales people, marketing people, you name it. You will run into that. That's also the idea of making it small so that you don't run into those challenges for all of your teams over a limited span of time. The problem with this again is one problem picturing teams in the organization when cutting through those silos. Another thing is that this is about this is where you enter organizational change, the organizational change domain. This is what a lot of companies want to avoid or resist doing by limiting Agile and Scrum to the team level. Because we don't want to change this. We just want to build Scrum the way we did, build stuff the way we did, but now just with Scrum instead of. So, and that brings us to the next problem. It's not just when people go through an whatever they call agile transformation. It's not just the lack of identifying the product, but it's also the, let's say, the lack of courage almost to touch organizational structures, which is crazy because you can't properly introduce Scrum without having an impact on that. And although in Scrum we don't say how an organization should look like, um, we do say that the organization will be impacted. And this is from that old paper, 1986, the new product development game. Already by then, Taikochi and Onaka found out in the companies that were doing a way of development that they baptized as Scrum. They said, oh my God, this strategy, this new product development approach, which they called Scrum, really can act and will act as an agent of change for the larger organization. And this is what most companies resist. This is what they fight against. We don't want to change the organization. So that's why I say take it step by step by step, so that for one development, Scrum development zone or development hub, you start running into that, you start figure out how can we do funding better? How should we work with people? How should we, it's a way, how should we respect self-organization more? And then once you've done that for one, several development hubs, um, take it to the next step. Add skills to your development hub to become what I call a product hub. And that means within your organization, next to your development hub, you've got stakeholders. Might be people like sponsoring you. You might have subject matter experts, people with very specific expertise that you might need. And rather than keeping them almost as a distant at a distance, working with them as development teams, I want them to be part of a new organizational unit, meaning an organizational entity that is completely focused around the product and not just development of the product, but all aspects that are needed to manage the product: sales, marketing, communication, the finance, legal aspects, and so on. All these people in a new organizational structure. And in the end, hopefully, a product hub would operate like a startup within the organization. They set their own agenda, they plan their own initiatives, they take the initiatives. It's all around focused on the product. We've got a product owner for that. It's at the heart of the product, not just at the heart of the Scrum teams, but at the heart of the product. You probably are using Scrum to create the product, to develop it, to change it, to update it, to evolve it, to make it bigger, to split off things, and so on. I'm not saying that everybody has to follow the Scrum process. The developers, the creation people probably do. And then you've got stakeholders, management experts, subject matter experts, sorry, spread out across the organization. And I want to pull them closer to the product and even make them full-time part of that thing that I call a product hub. Again, facilitated, coached, mentored by one multiple Scrum Master probably, so that
This
for a
product hub.
yeah, product hub, yeah. And so that for this product hub, still external management, leadership within the organization, that they really act as an investor, that they provide guidance, support, help you. These are quotes almost literally from that 1986 paper, 1986 paper, the new product development game. So that gradually your organization transforms into a networked structure of product hubs, where there are overarching functions, but it's limited, and they are all focused on product hubs. That's my future, let's say, dream, so that this old school industrial rigid organizational structure, step by step by step, by forming development hubs, by adding development hubs, by growing certain development hubs, by evolving certain development hubs into a real product hub, by adding skills that are not specifically development oriented in the structure, that gradually this structure step by step dissipates and is gradually replaced by this network structure of product hubs, where a product hub can totally manage all aspects of a product. not just the development aspects, but all of them. And then we would be organized for value and no longer for volume, because it will all be about impact outcome. We would have to create output always, but it's not the output that should be our focus. It should be the outcome of the output. The output is an increment. The increment is assumed to be valuable, but we don't know unless we go to market and we collect feedback, we capture feedback, we measure the outcome of our work. So it's my belief that in the end, Scrum will only be used effectively by organizations that have the courage and the will and the vision to rethink the organization and the organizational structures around Scrum. But it's going to need some help of us because those systems will not change themselves. It needs brave, courageous people to challenge that, to sort of try to cut holes into that, try to get people to go along. Yeah? But in the end, the problem is for me is, so I talked about the illusion of agility, and I've been wondering a lot. I've got way too much time, certainly recently. The whole idea of agile transformations, in a way, even if people wouldn't express it like that consciously, was to increase their agility. Is that not the wrong goal? It is not, for me, it's not about increasing agility. It's not about becoming more agile. That is important, but it's a means to an end. The goal should be the increasing the ability to generate value, to have an impact on your consumers, your users, thereby on your competitive position or your market position, or satisfy people, make life easier for people. That will generate money, income, whatever, revenues for the company. Or if you're not working for a for-profit company, it will certainly increase or improve the name or the fame of your company by better treating your consumers. And so generating value is and should have been the purpose. And I think as Agile movement and Scrum, we haven't made that explicit enough. It's not about Scrum. It's about Scrum for a certain purpose. Scrum cannot be its own purpose. So I'm recently thinking, I call this problem the illusion of agility, and it is a true problem. But the problem, the bigger problem underlying that or overarching that, whatever you want to call it, is the illusion of striving for agility. So I hope that helps. I'm not saying this is how I feel now after the battle. But I've gone through sort of stages and phases of feeling that. Fighting windmills, finding the energy again after this battle, Don Quixote, stand up again, take your horse again, go try to fight the next windmill. So I don't know, sometimes I don't know where I get the energy from, but it was the whole idea behind reimagining your Scrum. It was focused a lot on this idea of know your product, reboot your Scrum, start releasing valuable, potentially valuable increments of your product. That was sort of at the heart of it. It's also at the heart of the paper. But also in the paper, I hinted at sort of the bigger idea of reforming, transforming organizations. It's sort of within the time box of 1 hour.
It was great. Thank you so much. And thank you for the engagement, everyone. We really appreciate it. And we appreciate this. So many things obviously spot on. And now if only we can get like our decision makers to join this meeting, wouldn't that be great if we could, we need to get the right people in the room
Yeah.
to
That's
really
also,
understand
yeah.
this, right?
But that's also one way of making it small again. Even if you would have just one person believing you at the executive or the whatever level, one almost like sponsor of the at least of the ideas, that might already be really, really, really helpful. That's also
Exactly.
potentially a way of making it small again. Look for that one person that knows as a company, really, we're going to have to change. And like go through deep systemic change. not
Yeah.
just superficially rename things and oh, we're now calling it a product owner, but it's actually not.
It's like finding that champion sponsor
Yeah.
and moving forward. Um, all right. Well, we are short on time. I see Dan has. Do you have a quick question, Dan? I don't want to cut you off. I see we're running a little short on time, but
Yeah. Yeah, just very it's related to the same for this defining the, let's call it new ways of working or transformation. Who should be leading this this initiative? Should it be the people on the ground responsible for it, or it should be somewhere on the medium or senior level people?
Yeah. Well, over time, I've tried to move away totally from this idea because what you say, sort of, is it bottom up, top down?
Yeah.
Uh, because the way I've presented it with establishing development hubs and so on, it doesn't have a direction. It's not top down, it's not bottom up, it's not left right. It's all of those things at the same time. It's inside out, outside in. Um, the people that decide to adopt Scrum try to get through to them why. What is the why behind all of this? In that sense, try to sort of get people to talk about the pains that they're
Mm.
feeling. Why are we actually doing Scrum? What are the pains? So, without going into nitty-gritty, whatever details of Scrum, terminology, whatever, talk about why. Why are we doing this? And then go back to how can we use Scrum to achieve what we're trying to do with this.
Hmm.
So look for the why, and maybe look for the people that feel the pain the most, or um, or at least willing to admit it, because that's also a problem. We're all raised, certainly management leadership. You have to be brave, courageous. You can't, no vulnerability. You have to be the one that stands up and whatever. That's how we drive people into burnouts.
Hmm.
So allow them to show vulnerability. So the people feeling the pain and willing to admit that there is this pain.
So having a vision and a goal, a clear vision and a goal, and then inspecting, adapting towards that goal together with the teams, together
Yeah,
with the management.
yeah,
Check. Thank you.
okay. Well, again, Gunther, thank you so much for coming today. So appreciate it, and so great to have you back at Scrum Masters of the Universe. We always appreciate your insight and your wisdom, and yeah, just truly appreciate it.
yeah. You're welcome. Thanks for having me, and thank you everybody for being here.
Yeah.
Hope you liked it. Just to be clear, I hope you guys believe me because the rest of the world doesn't. Because I've been trying to introduce these ideas into a number of companies, and I don't think a lot of companies followed it, but still. Doesn't change the fact that I truly believe that this is the way to move forward.
I would agree.
You've convinced me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
All right,
Thank you all very much, and maybe at some future event, who knows?
all right, thank you.
Bye.